Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we'll be starting on the co-op side of my StimHack Store Champs Invitational run that I managed to finish in runners-up in. My Val deck is probably more interesting than this deck. This is my HB deck. It is quite vanilla, there's nothing to stand out or special about it. That being said, it really did stand out amongst the crowd like a purple thumb in a sea of yellow because of the 8 finalists that made the top cut. I was the only one playing a purple deck. And not just that, I was the only one playing a non-yellow deck. Apparently, all the other 7 competitors were sporting some form of yellow. I mean, it was a diverse field. There was Fast Throw, there was Acid Spam, there was Butcher Shop, there was Prison CTM, but I was the only one that wasn't playing a yellow deck at all. And that just blows my mind. How did I even make it up to second place? The crazy stuff. Anyway, let's look at the deck. I don't really have much to say about it. It really is a rush deck. Don't get me wrong, this is not a fast advanced deck, even though it's running 3 biotics. Most of your agendas will be scored by rush because biotic labor into an agenda is very, very expensive. It is all kinds of a rush because you try to close out the game as quickly as possible before the runner sets up and locks your remote and your R&D. So, a couple of key points to note with this deck. Firstly, this deck is in a very prime position to rush because you run a lot of agenda bait. You have 6 3-2 agendas. In fact, 7 agendas if you want to count Chronos Project. So that's my mistake. It's not 6 never advanced agendas, it's 7 counting Chronos Project. And 9 remote baits. So every other card that goes into a remote is an agenda. Your opponent has to try to keep you honest, and if they don't, you're going to come out ahead one way or another. It means that you either get an Ash off, you get a Jackson off, you get Advanced Assembly Lines off, or you score your agenda. You also have 11 burst economy cards. Notice there are no Adonises in this deck. This deck is too fast for Adonis, not to mention Eve Campaign. All your money is all burst econ. Yeah, so this means that you actually have slightly less econ because Adonis gives you, 8 credits, whereas all the cards here give you only 3 to 5 credits. Advanced Assembly Lines gives you 2, up to 3 if you use it off your turn, during the runner's turn. Natural Growth gives you 2 credits, 3 if you count ETF's ability, Hedge Fund gives you 4, Restructure gives you 5. It's very, very light on econ. So that's why you don't really want to spam biotics, and that's another reason for the very interesting ice suite. The ice is relatively cheap, average of 3.76 credits to res, which seems a bit high until you realize that you're in HB faction, the faction that usually have expensive Barra ice. 3.76 is actually pretty low, especially considering I'm not running any next dice at all. This is mostly contributed by Magnet and Fairchild 1.0. They are both pretty good ice for what they do, which is to tax out centrals early on. And yeah, all the ice is taxing in one way or another. That's the most important thing. This enables you to play the never advanced game. You keep slotting stuff in your remote. They can't run it every single turn because your ice is so darn taxing. And the biotic labor is there just to close out games. It is not something that you rely on as a crutch, even though there are 3 copies of it. Of course, you abuse it when you can, but I often find myself using it to do really pull off tricks that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise, such as scoring an NAPD from the never advanced state in the remote. That is one thing you can do as well. And yeah, these kind of tricks you can do with biotic labor. It makes it always a worthy include. So that's Rush HB in general. I think Rush is pretty well positioned both before and after the Most Wanted list. As a matter of fact, I brought this deck to the tournament not because I thought I would do well with it. In fact, I went into the tournament not even expecting to make the cut. I was just there to get some competitive practice with Rush HB, which I think is a viable archetype post Most Wanted list, post FAQ. And yeah, you can play this list perfectly well after the 1st of August. I think it's a pretty decent list, although you might have to do a bit of tweaks here and there. So, what are the main strategies when playing this deck, shall I say? If you want to pilot this deck, net deck this, give it a shot, what should you look to do? Firstly, craft the most annoying servers for your opponent's deck. Now that ice actually means something, now that Faust and David are on the Most Wanted list, you actually get to enjoy crafting the most annoying servers possible for your opponents. Where do you place that tiering? Should Fairchild go on the inside or the outside of a server? All these are very important questions to consider, and the better you can make a server, your servers, the more success you will have. That is one of the key things to think about when playing as ETF. Next thing is just jam anything you draw into the remote. Don't even think twice about it. Even if you think they can get in, even if they have a 90% chance of getting in, just do it. Even if they steal the agenda, they are being taxed out, opens the scoring window for you next turn. Rush to match point. This is quite important. This deck has no late game. No Caprice. Ash is pretty weak. Both pre and post most wanted list. So don't even think of trying to score agendas late game. It's not going to happen. You have to rush out early. Confuse your opponents with double advanced NAPDs. This is one of the very cool tricks that you can do. A lot of people forget how to play against NAPD ever since it went on the most wanted list. Punish them. If you're on 4 points, install double advance. They have to check it, and if you don't have the 4 credits, they weep. They weep so hard. NAPDs, you can do a lot of amazing things with NAPD Ash. If you haven't played Food Codes before, you be sure to try it, because NAPD Ash is one of the most annoying things you can ever do. And this is why of all my influence expenditure, I really want to keep the toll booth, because the 3 credit tax really adds up and makes NAPDs that much more annoying. Always beta test. Well, I'm not liable for any injuries or DOS games caused by beta testing, but as a general rule, it's better to beta test than not, because it's such a strong agenda when it does work. Sure, most of the time you end up leaking 2 agenda points to your opponent, but this is mitigated firstly because 2 of your agendas are NAPDs, so it's not the worst if your opponent has to pay 4 credits for those NAPDs. And more importantly, I feel that beta test is HB's version of Caprice. If you're not going to beta test, just play Polana Glacier instead. When you're playing Polana Glacier, you live and die by the side game. In HB, you live and die by your beta test. That's how I feel about it. Of course, sometimes you have to exercise your own judgment according to the game state, but most of the time, beta testing is not the wrong move. Now, let's watch a game of me in action with this deck. This game is from the top card in the lower bracket. We are both fighting for a spot in the top 4. I'm up against Heinzel, and I keep my opening hand, which has Hedge Fund, and Enderun Ice, and Vitruvius. Alright, so I play Hedge Fund, I gain a credit, and I install something. Why don't I install the Eli or the Magnet? This is because I want an Eli Magnet remote, and then I can slot the ABT behind. Eli into Magnet is one of the most secure things you can ever do. With so few credits, my opponent surely has no way of getting into this remote, short of being completely psychic and installing a Cyber Cipher and running second click, clicking through the Eli and breaking the Eli. The Magnet with Sai. So that doesn't work. I get to advance the ABT, and as I said, always fire ABT. I don't really get punished this time. I get a Turing. Turing goes on R&D because what I placed on R&D was a Fairchild 1.0. So I need something that does a bit more work. Oh, sorry, nope. I misclicked. I used the Turing on HQ instead. This was because I have 2 agendas in my hand right now, a Project Vitruvius and an ABT. So I found it more important to protect R&D, HQ, even if that meant open indexings and open Maker's Eyes. So you see how server construction is extremely important. I open with Fairchild, Magnet, and Eli. Choosing which eyes to put on R&D is a huge deal. And then when I beta test the Turing, choosing where to put the Turing is also a skill testing decision. A lot of players will put it on a remote thinking that firstly, it gains more strength, and secondly, you get 2 credits discount because you get to install it as the outermost eyes with a very huge discount. Now at this point, I was looking up Fairchild 1.0 on the internet because I was my opponent actually indexed into the Fairchild with 0 credits to his name. So he couldn't pay for the Fairchild 1.0's 1 credit. Therefore, for both subroutines, he was forced to trash a card. The thing is, I don't get to trash a card, my opponent gets to do it. So he trashed his data sucker and he clicked through the other subroutine. So this is where Fairchild can really punish you. He ran my server thinking that I couldn't res anything of value, but that Fairchild 1.0 slowed him a ton. If I got to do the trashing, you bet I'll trash that Proco and he'll be so far behind. So my opponent just indexed and seemed to not get anything out of it. And with the very slow start of my opponent, I managed to advance yet another agenda. It's another ABT, always fire the beta test. This one's not so lucky. I dump an agenda in the bin. But as shown, because your deck has 2 NAPDs, it's so much more resilient to to beta test. If my opponent runs without enough money, he'll be very sad, but he does gamble Dirty Laundry and steals the NAPD. It's still a tempo hit to my opponent. I'm happy with that, and I draw into my second NAPD here. So at this point, my opponent, he does not know that I actually drew into my NAPD, and he doesn't know that I slotted a Vitruvius into the remote either. He's just very intent on locking my R&D with indexing, which by now gives him another 5 fresh free cards because the ABT allowed me to plow through the R&D lock and thereby allow him to get a free fresh indexing, which is kind of a trouble. Now he has seen 10 cards of R&D, but most of them are not agendas. I wonder why. They are all in my hand, that's why. So I scored 2 beta tests, and now I'm getting the 3rd Vitruvius out. Just keep jamming stuff in the remote. Jam, jam, jam. He cannot afford to spend the time to install breakers, his dog, his Sai to get into my remote. And just like that, I'm on 6 points, and he has to now be very concerned that every single card that goes in the remote from this point onwards is the game-winning agenda. I'm gonna play around with him. The Cyber Dex goes in the remote. He is forced to check this. Instead of indexing me or playing a Maker's Eye, or charging out his turning wheel, or getting more money, he's forced to run my Magnet remote. And he actually played an R&D on a Sai on R&D earlier, so that was quite a mistake. If he played the Sai on the remote, it would be much easier for him to contest it. But now he's forced to bring out the SMC, which then brings out the Cyber Cypher on the remote he needs to get past the Magnet. It's not cheap. Corroder 4 credits. SMC into Sai is another 1 or 2 credits with 1 to break the Magnet, and all he gets is a Cyber Dex. That is very disheartening, and that's the beauty of HB Never Advance. Now, you can probably see my route to victory this game. Even if I get R&D locked this game, I can still win with what's in my hand. If he's not going to apply any HQ pressure at all, I can win by never advancing the NAPD and then playing Biotic Labor into quadruple advance next turn. You don't want to install advance the NAPD, obviously because your opponent will go for it. By playing never advance games, my opponent will be a lot less suspecting. So I give my opponent a bit of reading room to set up, and that is exactly what I do not want. I need to continue pressuring the remote here. So after setting up a bit of defense on my R&D, I place an Ichi over there last turn. This turn, I'm going for the remote pressure. After thinking for a bit, I decided that I could afford to tax him out by playing the toll booth on server 1, followed by the NAPD contract. So my opponent has to make a decision at this point. Does he want to go for the remote lock, the control style Kate deck, or does he want to go all out R&D? Given that he drew the 3rd indexing, he's inclined to go for the R&D. And that's why I res the Ichi. So yeah, of course I res it, even though it means I can't res the toll booth from the remote. Even though it means I cannot play Biotic NAPD for the win, I absolutely cannot give away the fact that there's an agenda in server 1. And resing the Ichi is a must, to make it look like I'm desperate to keep him out. So basically I'm trying to sell him this story. I saw a lot of agendas early on. I'm now on 6 points through Never Advance, through your Negliance to check my remote. Can you buy my story? Can you buy my story that I'm trying to sell you? I'm trying to sell you the fact that I have 1 more agenda left in my hand that I slotted in the remote. He's not buying it at all. He's saying I R&D locked you to death earlier on. I played 2 indexing, saw 10 cards. This indexing will surely lock you off any agendas. You surely can't have any more access to agendas in hand. You haven't saw a Jackson. You haven't really been drawing. I don't buy your story. And that's exactly the story I want him to buy. Because by being completely unsuspecting, he is assuming that what's in the remote is not an agenda, but an Ash. Maybe, I don't know, maybe an Adonis, maybe an Advanced Assembly Lines, anything but an agenda. So at this point, he's going in for the indexing, because he just cannot bring himself to believe that I saw 4 agendas so early on. And yeah, I guess you could say it was lucky that I actually agenda flooded out that early. In any case, he, on his first run, he managed to use a sharpshooter to get past the Ichi with his clone chip, so that means that's his clone chip used up. He wants to steal the agenda again on the same turn. That meant that he was forced to actually click through the Eli. I was very tempted to boost the trace at that point. It would cost me all my credits, but I would be able to land the tag and net damage, the brain damage on him. Decided it wasn't worth it, and I top decked very luckily into a lateral growth. This allowed me to burst up to the magic 8 credit mark needed to either rest a toll booth or score the NAPD with biotic labor. He laid back for a turn, thinking that wasn't an agenda because I didn't score it last turn, and that was his downfall. It turned out to be a biotic NAPD. So this really demonstrates how versatile biotic labor is. It's not just for fast advance. It turns your 2 NAPDs into a 3-2 agenda, the 8th and 9th 3-2 agenda in your game. And that's quite a huge deal against someone who can otherwise very easily remote lock you. Now, you can refer to the graphic. There's a chart there showing my credit level throughout the entire game. The numbers at the bottom is the turn number. There are 2 numbers for each turn. One is for the start of corp turn, my turn, and the other one's for the start of runner's turn. You will notice that firstly, I bursted to 11 credits on turn 1, and I never exceeded that credit level for the rest of the game. That's quite insane. It's actually not very common to have that with this deck, but that just goes to show you how fast you can put the pedal to the metal if you really choose to do so. Secondly, one very interesting thing that you notice is between turns 4 to 8, there's this oscillating motion, very, very strict oscillating motion where my credit level jumps between 2 and 5 between the runner and the co-op's turn. Every single turn, I was either taking 3 credits, that means taking 2 credits and installing something to gain 1 with HB's ability, or I'm triple advancing to score an agenda. So every turn goes like, take 3, score agenda, take 3, score agenda. And that's quite insane. That's how I managed to get 3 agendas so quickly. By the end of turn 7 turns, I have 6 agenda points. It is so fast. You think only astrobiotics can go that fast? Well, this definitely proves you wrong. And from turn 7 onwards, it was all just a matter of stabilizing, keeping R&D safe while making sure that the remote was too punishing to steal an NAPD from, and it was only a matter of time before I managed to close the game out with enough credits to play biotic labor into NAPD. So this is just a very prime example of how a rush deck works. You spam stuff behind the taxing remote, and when they are finally forced to check it, they lose tempo, and you gather up the resources needed to make the final push. That's how you do it. Thanks for watching. I've been Netrunner. Goodbye.